We moved to Grandma's house in mid-October, when the trees stood almost bare and the air smelled of dirt, but not yet of snow. Mom said it was temporary, until things settle, but I knew she was lying. We had nowhere to go back to. Dad died 2 months earlier, a head-on collision, and that was it. No funeral, no proper goodbye, just a closed casket and Mom's tightly pressed lips. I hardly knew Grandma. She lived in the village of Stejkino, which wasn't marked on any normal map. Mom barely spoke to her. As a child, I thought Grandma had already died. Her pictures were always old, black and white, with unnatural expressions. In one, she stood by a cellar holding a massive key that looked forged. As a kid, I thought the cellar had a face. The shadows and bricks formed features. When we arrived, the sun was already setting, turning the air blue. The house stood surrounded by weeds, the porch sagging inward, and on the southern side yawned the mouth of that very cellar. Its door was made of black metal, ancient-looking, wrapped in chains. "Don't go near it," Grandma said immediately. "No matter what. Got it?" I nodded. But even then, something about that cellar was pulling me in. Grandma was strict, but not unkind. She didn't watch TV, didn't use a phone, and rarely made small talk. Mostly, she brewed thick soups, dried herbs, and scribbled in an old, moldy notebook with darkened pages. At night, I couldn't sleep. It was too quiet. No cars, no neighbors, not even dogs. Just the occasional groan of old floorboards. But on the fourth night, I heard something else. Scratching. At first soft, then more distinct. Coming from below, like someone was clawing at the floor from underneath. I froze, listening. The scratching had rhythm. And then came a whisper. "Pasha," my name, but said wrong. Not Grandma, not Mom. The voice was a child's, cracked. I got up and followed the sound. It led me to the kitchen, which had a view of the backyard and cellar. Moonlight shone directly through the gap between the door and the chain. Something was moving inside. The next morning, I asked Grandma, "Is someone down there?" She slammed her hand on the table. I said, "Don't go near it, and never look at the chain when it moves." Mom stayed silent. She stared into her teacup, like answers might surface there. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in the cellar, ankle-deep in black water. On the walls, charcoal drawings, faceless people hanging upside down. In the corner, someone was singing, a child's voice, raspy like an old record. It repeated, "I lie under your floorboards. I hear you when you sleep. When you wake, I'll wear your skin." I woke up in a cold sweat. There were scratches on my neck, small, like a child's nails. A week later, Mom left for the city. Said it was just for a couple of days. I stayed with Grandma. She didn't talk much, constantly boiled herbs and smeared grease on the windows. That day, she went out to the garden. I was alone, or so I thought. The rustling started near evening. Not mice, footsteps. I pressed my ear to the floor. Someone was walking beneath the floorboards. I followed the sound, to the cellar. I grabbed a flashlight. I don't remember walking over. I remember the chain. It was pulsing, like it was breathing. I touched it, and the chain unclasped on its own. The door creaked open with a hiss. A wave of cold hit my face. The smell of mildewed dolls, dampness, and milk. Inside was a staircase, long, wooden, descending into darkness. On either side, candles, burning. Someone was already there. I went down. At the bottom was a stone hall. Icons on the walls, but not orthodox. Every face had its eyes gouged out. In the center, a child's bed. Empty. Surrounding it were dolls. Life-sized. Homemade. Each wore a dress. Each had a name tag on its chest. One of them said, "Pasha." I don't remember how I reached it. My name was carved on the chest, sharp and clear. The doll stood slightly crooked, as if it had just been placed. Its eyes were mine, brown and glassy. Behind me, someone said, "Pasha, you didn't listen." I turned. It was Grandma. But her face, it wasn't right. Off-center, eyes too dark, pupils frozen. In her hand, a bread knife. "He doesn't like the disobedient. You called him. He heard. Now he's in you." "Who?" I barely whispered. She smiled, turned and climbed the stairs. The candlelight began to go out. One by one, fast. From deep below came wet breathing. First heavy, then ragged. It rose from the floor. I ran for the stairs, but the door slammed shut. The chain was back in place. Through the slit, I saw Grandma praying. But the words weren't Russian, not any language at all. The following days, I barely slept. Grandma acted normal again, smiling, baking pies, never mentioned the cellar, but every evening I heard crying from under the house. And singing. Mom never came back. After a week, Grandma said, "Your turn now. I'm old. He doesn't need me anymore." That night, I went to the cellar again. Not because I wanted to, because my body walked on its own. Below, everything was the same. Except the doll with my name was gone. In its place stood a mirror. I approached. In the reflection, it was me. But behind me, something, huge, pale, skinless, holding my shadow. And then I woke up in bed, or thought I did, but in the bathroom mirror, the doll with my eyes still stood. I found another page among Grandma's papers. The handwriting was Mom's. I dreamed of him since childhood. There was always a doll in the cellar that looked like me. Grandma said it protected, but I heard it breathe when the door was closed. I remember when I was 8, I saw a boy standing by the chain. I told him not to open it, but he was already holding the key. The next day, he was gone. And Grandma simply said, "His name doesn't echo anymore. That means he's completely gone." That's when I understood. Mom knew she'd never return. In Grandma's notebook were strange sketches, maps of the ground beneath the house. Where the cellar stood now, there used to be a burial mound. A 1958 newspaper clipping said, "During rural construction, an ancient grave was uncovered. Locals begged to leave it sealed, saying inside lay the Old Master, a spirit that feeds on children's names. Scientists dismissed the claim as folklore. Grandma had scribbled in the margin, 'I didn't summon him, but he wakes when forgotten. Better to feed him, silently.'" Many years passed. A new family moved into the village. A young mother, with a tattoo of a chain and 3 words on her neck. A 7-year-old boy who asked about the strange singing that came from the cellar at night. Grandma was long dead, but the cellar still breathes. One day, the boy found an old notebook. On the last page, someone had scratched, "You didn't read this by accident. You're already inside." When Claire Evans moved with her 6-year-old daughter Ivy to the small town of Merrow Creek, she hoped for a quiet new beginning. The divorce had drained her, and Ivy had started having nightmares ever since they left the city. The little house at the edge of town was old, yes, but charming in its own crooked way. A lopsided porch, ivy climbing the walls, how ironic, and a swing hanging from a bent tree branch in the backyard. But something was wrong the moment they stepped inside. Ivy stared too long at the corners of rooms. She spoke in whispers when no one else was around, and she began talking to someone, or something, named Mr. Bell. Claire first heard the name during dinner on their second night in the house. "I saved some soup for Mr. Bell," Ivy said, setting a small bowl down on the floor beside her chair. Claire blinked. "Who's Mr. Bell?" Ivy smiled, her teeth small and perfect. "He lives in the walls. He's really thin, like paper. He says the soup smells like skin." Claire almost dropped her spoon. "That's not funny, Ivy." "I'm not joking, Mommy." Claire told herself it was an imaginary friend. Kids invented all sorts of weird companions when they were lonely or anxious. But things escalated fast. By the end of the first week, Ivy started sleepwalking. Claire would find her standing in the hallway at night, facing the wall, whispering something over and over. The words weren't English, or any language Claire knew. Then came the drawings. Dozens of pages, crayons sketched with things no child should imagine. Limbs bending the wrong way, faces without eyes, something with horns, always drawn just behind a little girl with pigtails. Claire asked her about them. "I don't remember drawing that," Ivy said. "Maybe Mr. Bell did." The pediatrician suggested stress, trauma from the divorce. "Children process pain through symbolism," he said. "Try not to feed into the behavior. Let her feel safe." But Ivy wasn't the one in danger. Claire started hearing voices at night. It began as a low humming in the walls, then whispers under the bed. And once, just once, Claire swore she heard Ivy speaking with two voices at once, one high and sweet, the other slow and gravelly, like rocks being ground together. She thought about moving out, but money was tight. And besides, how do you explain something like this to a landlord? By the third week, Ivy refused to sleep in her bed. She built a little nest in the corner of Claire's room out of pillows and blankets. "He comes into my room at night," she whispered. "He says he wants to wear me." Claire pressed her daughter close, heart pounding. "It's not real, baby. It's just dreams." "No," Ivy said. "He's getting closer." Claire set up a camera, a cheap, motion-activated baby monitor aimed at Ivy's room. She didn't expect to catch anything. Part of her hoped it would just confirm Ivy was dreaming. What she saw the next morning made her throw up. The footage began normal, Ivy asleep, curled up beneath her pink comforter. Then, at exactly 2:14 a.m., the door creaked open. Not all the way, just a crack, enough for something to slip through. A tall, impossibly thin shape, blacker than shadow. Moving wrong, its arms too long, fingers grazing the floor. The thing didn't walk. It flowed. It moved to Ivy's bed and leaned down, face nearly touching hers. And then Ivy sat up calmly, smiling. They spoke. No sound on the recording, just Ivy's lips moving. Then the thing reached out and pressed its hand against her chest. Ivy gasped, her back arched, and then the thing disappeared into her, melted through her skin like smoke. Claire didn't tell anyone. What could she say? That her daughter had become a vessel for something inhuman? She tried to confront Ivy, tried to show her love, read her stories, hold her tightly. But Ivy wasn't the same anymore. She began carving symbols into her toys, started burying things in the yard. Animal bones, Claire would later discover. Neighbors reported strange noises coming from the house. One old woman from down the road crossed herself whenever she passed. And then came the incident at school. Ivy attacked another child during recess. No warning, no screaming, just cold violence. She scratched at his face, biting, laughing while he bled. The teacher pulled her off. Ivy turned to her and said, in a voice too old to be hers, "He saw too much. I had to close his eyes." They suspended her. Claire tried to apologize, but she could see it in their faces. Fear. They didn't want Ivy back. Desperate, Claire turned to the internet, demonology forums, old occult sites. She even contacted a woman from Ohio who claimed to perform soul extractions. One thing kept repeating across sources. Possession rarely starts violent. It's seductive, slow, especially with children. The entity becomes a friend, makes itself safe, and then it wears them. And once it finishes, once the body's fully claimed, there's no going back. The signs were all there. Claire dug deeper. She searched the house, found old newspaper clippings under a loose floorboard. A previous tenant, a little boy, had vanished in 1987. Last seen talking to a man in the walls. The case was never solved. A priest had come to bless the home shortly after. Died of a heart attack 2 days later. Claire knew what she had to do. That night, she brought Ivy into the living room. Candles lit. Symbols copied from books she'd half understood drawn onto the floor. "I want to play a game," she told Ivy. Ivy tilted her head, grinning. "Mr. Bell likes games." "I know," Claire said softly. "But this one is special. It's called Come Out and Show Me." Ivy's eyes narrowed. Her smile faded. "You don't want to see him, Mommy." "I already do," Claire whispered. She began the chant, words that tasted like blood. The candles flared. Ivy screamed, not in fear, but rage. Her little body contorted. Her eyes turned black, pupilless, her mouth opened impossibly wide. And then he came out. Ivy's body went rigid. Her arms jerked backwards like marionette strings were pulling them, and her spine arched so sharply Claire heard something crack. A shriek tore from her throat, layered, high-pitched and girlish on top, guttural and inhuman beneath. And then from her mouth he emerged. Not in a puff of smoke, not in fire or fury. He peeled his way out, unfolding like wet parchment, dragging himself from the hollow of her body. Claire fell back in horror. The thing towered over Ivy's crumpled form, thin as a wire, its skin paper-white and stretched taut. Limbs too long, joints reversed. A mouth like a torn wound, stitched shut with black thread. Its eyes, two coins of rusted iron, locked onto Claire. "You summoned me, little mother," it rasped. Its voice came from inside her head. Claire tried not to vomit. "I want her back," she said, barely breathing. "She gave me the invitation." The creature drifted closer, toes never touching the floor. "She asked to be loved," I answered. "I live in her heart now. I whisper. She listens. Why would she want you again?" Claire reached into her coat. A small glass vial of blood, her own, and a rosary burned black over a flame. Not much, but maybe enough. She threw it into the circle. The creature screeched, recoiling. The candlelight flickered violently. Ivy groaned behind it. Claire began the final incantation, words scrawled in her notebook, with trembling hands the night before. Words older than language. The demon howled, flailing against the barrier of salt and sigils. "She's mine!" "No!" Claire shouted, voice breaking. "You don't get to have her! You don't get to play house in her skin!" The ritual intensified. Symbols on the floor burned red-hot, scorching the wood. Wind rushed through the room, though every window was shut. The lights burst in showers of sparks. And then, with a deafening crack, the demon shattered like glass. Gone. Silence fell. Claire collapsed to her knees, choking on the smoke and ash. Ivy lay still, her chest rising, slow and shallow. Her eyes fluttered open. "Mommy?" she whispered. Claire sobbed, pulled her into her arms. I've got you, baby. You're safe." That night, Claire burned the circle, the floorboards, every trace of what had happened. She took Ivy to the hospital, told the doctors it was a seizure. They bought it. Kids bounce back fast, they said. But Claire knew. Something had changed. Ivy was quieter now, quieter than before. She didn't talk to Mr. Bell anymore. She didn't talk to anyone, really. Weeks passed, then months. One night, Claire tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead. "Do you remember what happened?" she asked. Ivy stared at the ceiling. "No." "You sure?" She nodded. Then, after a pause, "He was lying, you know, Mr. Bell. He said he loved me, but he didn't." Claire's blood froze. "How do you know that?" Ivy turned her head slowly. Her smile was off. "Because I'm still here, and I remember what it feels like to be alone inside." Claire didn't sleep that night. 2 weeks later, Claire found something buried under Ivy's bed. A notebook, filled with drawings again. But these weren't like before. They were worse. New symbols, ones Claire didn't recognize. Not in Latin, not in Hebrew, not anything human. And on the last page, drawn in black crayon, a tall, thin man with hollow eyes, standing over Claire's bed, holding Ivy's hand. The nightmares returned. The shadows in the house grew darker, colder. Claire began hearing whispers again, but now they came from Ivy's room. Only now she wasn't sure if the voice was Ivy's or something still using it. Because demons don't always leave. Sometimes they wait. Wait for the circle to fade. Wait for you to stop watching. Wait for the next game.